Hey everybody, it's Gloria here, and welcome to Getting Real with Gloria, where my journey supports yours. I am so excited today to have on a very special guest, I will say, probably champion through my grief journey, and one of the people that really helped me not only navigate the grief experience after losing Teddy Bear, my dog, but who empowered me to actually make really big decisions and changes in my life because of how I moved through my grief journey. So I want to welcome Kelly with us today. And Kelly, now are you going by Kelly Johnson or Kelly Drescher or Johnson Drescher?
My legal name is Kelly Drescher Johnson, but I socially just go by Kelly Johnson or just Kelly.
I call for folks, all of you, she is the Kelly to me. But Kelly Johnson obtained her BA in music education from Carroll University and a Master's of Divinity from Boston University with a concentration in practical theology. She holds certificates as a trauma and grief informed professional through PESI and is a registered pet chaplain, which we're definitely going to talk about today because this is a really special, thing that Kelly has worked very hard toward through the Association for Veterinary Pastoral Education. She's helped create content for the Parmenter Foundation on pet loss, and she's participated on various panels and podcasts regarding pet loss as well. And actually, It's Rough Out There that I interviewed with yesterday is all thanks to Kelly and her connection. And I love this in her bio. She and her husband are owned by three dogs, Daisy, Motley, and Harper. And if you have many dogs, you know that to be true. So I'd love to sort of start out. So just so all of you know, I met Kelly shortly after my dog Teddy Bear passed. So I lost him in May of 2020, and I met Kelly the first few weeks of June. I was recommended for Kelly's grief group by my own veterinarian. And at first, I was very hesitant about going to a pet grief group. For many of you, you may have associated grief groups with just being a sad place. And that's kind of what I thought it was going to be too. I thought it was going to be a place where I would just go and feel worse than I already felt. And I was also very reluctant to share about my loss because I wasn't quite sure if I trusted people with that information, if I wanted to be vulnerable in front of people I didn't know. But I am so grateful that I took the leap and went to Kelly's grief group because I learned so much, not just about loss, but about myself by going to that grief group. And it was so much more than I had expected. It wasn't just sad. There were many times where we were all laughing at silly stories about our pets or just having those aha moments of revelation. But in doing so in a supportive space, we were all able to sort of jive off each other's energy and really feel a sense of being nurtured in that space and feeling more energized sometimes when we left that space. And so I'd love for you, Kelly, to just talk a little bit about, um, first of all, why is pet loss hurt so much?
Oh, we spend so much time with our pets. And I've heard you echo this back. They love us unconditionally. For many people, it is the only authentically
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
um, unconditional love we really experience. um Unless you happen to see like children interacting, and we love the purity of a child's love. Dogs never lose that, or cats or birds. I want to be inclusive of all species,
Yes,
but they
yes.
don't lose I am who I am, and I'm not going to pretend to be something else. Unless your dog or cat is begging for food, then whatever they think you want. um but even in doing that, they're still themselves. They have their little, tappy things they do, or a certain meow. I think when you have that level of love and experience in your life, when it goes away, it leaves such a huge void.
Mhm, mhm.
um People will say, let me know what I can do for you, or how can I be there. And it's like, unless you are willing to wag your tail, you can't.
Yeah, yeah.
You There's nothing you can do to replace this. And a lot of people have really intense relationships with their pets,
Yeah, yeah.
and in a really healthy, beautiful way.
Mhm.
Those relationships are intense. I know you experienced it with Teddy Bear. I've experienced it with the dog that I lost, Beth. it's just like, wow, that's the relationship I'm missing now. Like,
Yeah, I love how you said this authentic love that's very much not based on anything that we could do or not do, or, who we are that day or we're not. And I think that that is definitely a component of why loss hurts so much when we lose a pet. And then, like you said, the day to day, like with family members, we're not always around them every day. We may live in different states, and we may have grown apart physically or emotionally. And whereas our pets are really a huge part of our lives and a huge part of just what we're used to seeing and experiencing in our world, from a brain mapping perspective, we're just really used to having that mapped out in our brain. So when it's not there, it really is painful. And I think too, a lot of times, especially with dogs, but with all pets, um, there is this sense that we can drop our walls. We can really be authentic. It's not tiring to be around our pets because we don't have to put on the face, whether that's a professional face that we have to wear for work, or it's an I'm doing fine because this other party or family member or friend that I'm with needs me more right now than I need. So I think animals really have this way of seeing into our soul, of the essence of who we are, and we don't have to pretend. And that's, like you said, that's really special, and hard to.
they also navigate the I need from you and you need from me so much better than we seem to be able to do.
Yeah,
I
totally.
I need food, I need water, I need to potty or have my potty area cleaned. I need affection from you, but they're like, "Oh, you need affection from me." And like, I want to protect mommy, I want to protect dad, I want to protect my person, whether it's physically protect or heart protect.
Hmm.
There's something really lovely in that. It's very parent child.
It is in many ways. I feel like it's parent child, and then in other ways, it's therapist, therapist patient. It's teacher student. There's so many different roles that animals, I feel like, play with us, which also it's very dynamic. It's more so dynamic than it is with people, I feel like. And especially for me with Teddy Bear, I feel like he just had so many roles for me. He had a safety component, which was very parental. He had a friend component, of course, a companionship. He had a teacher component for me. He was always teaching me things. I felt like I was learning from him constantly, like a mentor. And then, he also had this sort of, like, he was my child as well. There was a nurturing sense that I wanted to care and take care of him too, especially as he got older. And I feel like the relationship shifted a little bit, and it became more me caring for him as he aged. But yeah, I think it's kind of cool that we get a chance to play all these different roles, and also to receive all these different aspects of our pet in their lives too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd love to hear about what is a pet chaplain. And I know you've done just extensive dedicated work with this. And what are you bringing to people right now? And how is this supporting people who are grieving pets? Because I know that getting support in the pet loss journey is so critical. I mean, it really is critical. And I don't know if there's enough out there right now, but I do love that you and I are having these kinds of conversations, and we're, erasing stigmas, and we're bringing support to light so that people really know what's out there for them.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of questions.
I
Uh,
know. Pick your favorites.
favorites, all of them. Chaplaincy. Let's just start with chaplains. Are people who are highly trained professionals, usually with religious undertones, but they care for people wherever they are on their spiritual journey. So you don't have to be Catholic or Lutheran or Jewish or Buddhist. Chaplains are professionally trained to be there for everyone and support. They do tend to focus with certain areas that are more comfortable, but I can sit and be present with anyone. It is about your spiritual care and what feeds your soul, um, your reason for why.
Hmm.
Why am I here? Not what does life mean? I mean, that's a great question to ask
Mhm.
every day, but why am I here? Why did I choose this space to be in? what do I give and what do I need back? And it's a huge intersection of our sense of being. So chaplains tend to sit in those spaces. They are for a specific setting, for a specific need. And so you have like trauma chaplains who will come in after disasters or serious events, who will come in and support people through that trauma. But at a certain point, that ends and other caregivers take over.
Gotcha.
So that's the work of a chaplain. Veterinary chaplaincy builds on that with a specific setting of the veterinary world. I work in an emergency room. I've been working veterinary ER, veterinary hospitals for about 6 years now. So I work alongside the doctors, the technicians, the support staff, other CSRs, and get some of the feel behind the decision making. I get to know how doctors make decisions or how they talk. I can translate some of it, but I can't give medical advice. I can't provide information about, well, what do you think this meant? I put a hard, fast boundary on that. So I work within the veterinary field and can provide that level of support. And I translate that back into supporting people who have lost their pets. So that's that's actually a quick snapshot of veterinary work. And then I just forgot all of your other questions at that point.
That's fine. So when it comes to your support in the veterinary world, in the ER, is that more on the actual veterinary side for the vets and the techs and things like that, less so on the consumer facing?
It ebbs and flows. When I'm there, I'm primarily doing my work as a receptionist, but I am there for members of the team, or if we have a particularly difficult diagnosis or euthanasia, I may sit in there with the person a little longer. That's kind of how I do it within a hospital.
Okay.
My primary focus is outside and doing this as a private practice, in being there doing one-on-one consultations or doing the support group
Yeah.
work.
So what does sort of a one-on-one consultation with you as a pet chaplain look like if somebody felt like they might need this type of support? What would they
It's
be?
honestly
Yeah.
like this. We just sit
Okay.
and talk. I except that I ask questions.
You're not in the hot seat.
But I'm curious. I like I like Ted. This is what we do. Ted Lasso for that. Be curious, and I'll ask more questions. Let's pause. Say more about that. Or this seems to be a real sticky spot for you. Let's talk through that right now. If they want some things to try out, I've got a whole plethora, a handbag that comes with
You
me of
do.
tools. Sometimes I make them up on the spot, and you told me some things, and I'm like, wow, that stuck. I'm so surprised it just came out of me. But that's a lot of what this is. We sit and we talk. It's not therapy. I want to put a clear line on that. I don't do therapy work. I do a lot of reflective, this is what I'm hearing. It sounds like your life had this trajectory going on, and affirming that there's a lot of love present, not past,
Right.
present. Even if they're not here, the love
Yeah.
is still present.
Would you say that you are helping folks post loss or also pre loss if there is sort of a terminal case or sort of end of life care decisions and things like that? Are people able to come to you then, or is it more the just post loss?
No, I'd love it if people came before, because the grieving before is
Yeah.
very different from the grieving after.
So true. So true.
And this is well documented within the human area of medicine. When people are doing caregiving for elderly parents, and we know that they're preparing for hospice, or really anyone preparing for hospice, but it's more documented with elderly. that there's a certain level of grieving before,
Mhm.
and the grieving after can be very different.
Yeah.
And those two things, we can reconcile it. They are part of the human
Yeah.
experience.
So
Grief
true.
is not something anyone gets to avoid, because being alone is a grief itself.
Yeah.
So I right now have been doing a lot more post loss, but I
Mhm.
would love to do more pre anticipation with people and removing the stigma much earlier.
So true. Yeah, I think people, especially depending on their support network, when they do lose a pet. And I know I lost Teddy during the pandemic, which was hard in its own way because you didn't have the same physical support from people that maybe would have stopped by and given you a hug or what have you. I know my mother or my sister would have come and been with him the day that we did euthanize him in the backyard, and I know they would have been here, but they were not able to. And so there was definitely that feeling of loss within a loss, just because it was the pandemic and I couldn't have that physical support. So I feel like when you're facing the anticipatory loss of a pet, to have that extra support so that that, no matter who's around you, no matter what kind of support they're offering you, you've got this like extra going on, that I think
But
everybody really needs. That's
yeah, and I
neutral.
think it's great to come to a group and talk to the
Yeah.
people who have acutely experienced this.
Hmm.
What do I need to prepare myself? Like, do I need to get people to make me meals so
Yep.
that I can just pop it in the microwave or put
Yep.
it in the oven and I don't have to think about what to
Yep.
eat.
Yep.
I need to get comfy socks and a blanket, and I need to subscribe to YouTube or this channel, uh, to Hulu. Like, I need to have
Yep.
things in place so that I can cocoon and take care of myself.
Yep.
And I can say a lot of tips and tricks, but I think talking to people in a support group
Hmm.
means so much more than my saying it.
Yeah, I did find that going to the group ended up being more than I had ever expected, because I think what I didn't really realize was when you lose a pet, this is a very specific type of loss. And not everybody, even the most well intentioned, kind people, are going to understand that loss necessarily and are going to respond in the best way. They're not going to know how to, because maybe they've never experienced this before, or maybe they've just don't understand, or maybe when they lost, it was different, whatever it might be. But when you come to a pet grief group, I feel like while everyone is on their own unique grief journey, we are universally united in the sense that there's a dedication that was there for our pets and a level of bonding that was there that is similar. And so we feel that intensity of the loss, not the same, but in a similar way. And so we're able to feel like, oh, this person gets it. And that's what I didn't really realize I would need, was going there and then being like, oh, all of these people get it. And yet this person's got a bunny, this person has a dog, this person has a bird. Like, everybody could have had different animals, but yet it was very much a common, these folks get me and they understand, and this is a safe place for me to be able to wear my heart on my sleeve and share things, because they basically are able to look into my eyes and say, I know your pain because I felt that pain. And there's something that's sort of special about that, and there's also something that I think is necessary about being heard and being validated inside your grief journey. And that was something that I really got from you and from the group. And I remember the first day, I love this story, folks. And you'll hear it again from me probably for the rest of my life, and certainly in my book when my book eventually comes out. But Kelly, the first time I ever went to grief group, I was very nervous. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to talk at all or tell anything about Teddy Bear. Like, I gave it a shot. And I listened to people talk about their pets, and I listened to Kelly, provide just these beautiful, diamonds of wisdom throughout the class for the evening. And she said something to a woman who had unfortunately experienced support in the beginning of her grief journey, but when it had gone on a couple months, her family was asking her, "Why aren't you done yet? Like, come on, this was a cat, get over it," which is a common response, unfortunately, that people still have. in response to a pet versus if it were a parent or, a spouse where people maybe wouldn't have that reaction. Again, just they're miscalculating the bond there. So they don't understand. And this woman was really hurt by this because she was very devoted to her cat. She felt a very strong sense of grief still after a few months, and she began to think something was wrong with her because of this experience. And I actually know that this is a common theme among a lot of my friends too, that I felt like, is there something wrong with me because I'm still grieving and it's months or even a year or 2 years? No, there is nothing wrong with you. Everyone takes different, times to process and allow their mind to relearn their world without their loved one. Um, and so Kelly said to this person, no one gets to tell you how to grieve. And she said it with such fierceness. And it was the only thing she said. And I swear that the room just like reverberated with these words. And they came out and reached out of the screen and like placed their hand on my heart. And I just felt this sense of like, oh my God, yes, no one gets to tell you how to grieve. And it was probably the single most important piece of information that I got.
Mm.
Even though I got so much more out of the entire year that I went to grief group and then came, in and out for the next year after that. But that no one gets to tell you how to grieve was so empowering. And I think we forget about that on the grief journey, that we do need to feel empowered. We may be very sad. We may feel vulnerable. We may even feel weak. But being empowered to sit in those places is still really important. And I think that's one of the things that you provide people is that cushion underneath them that allows them to sit in that space, to be in that place where they may feel afraid of actually even being so open, of being so raw, and allowing someone to scoop in and say, that's okay, you be where you are. You're exactly where you need to be, and no one gets to tell you how to grieve. And that just was, yeah, go ahead.
I'll say, we should put a caveat on this, though, that if you are feeling like you can't function, you're not able to go to work,
Mhm.
or you still don't feel like eating, or your sleep is disrupted. And lots of people wear smartwatches, and your heart rate is just all over, or you're having a lot of weight gain or weight loss. This 2 weeks is about the time to start checking in with yourself, or maybe looking to a medical
Yep.
professional. There is a difference between grieving and having a mental health issue,
Yes.
and they can look very similar.
Sure.
They
Yeah.
walk along side by
Yeah.
side. Um, so when it comes to the grieving, absolutely,
Yep.
this is your grief journey. People should be supportive along the way. Your grieving will end. The hurt may not stop, but the heaviness of it will come to an end at some point.
Yep.
But if it's feeling heavier and heavier, please
Yes.
speak to someone in the mental health field, get extra support. And even if it's medication, I want to take the stigma out of
Yeah.
medication. It doesn't mean you're going to be on it for your life.
Right.
I love the shirt that says, if you can't make it yourself, store-bought is fine. It works for Ina Garten. It can work for, hey, she uses store-bought like puff pastry sometimes. She said it's okay. If you need help with your brain to work optimally, wow, that's a hard word.
Yeah.
Please do it. It doesn't have to be forever. It's amazing how for a few months to get you back and centered, it can really change your life.
Yeah, definitely second that. I think sometimes grief does, especially if you have previous mental health challenges that you're dealing with, whether they be anxiety or depression or, whatever it may be. And even if you're managing those challenges, grief can sometimes put you off balance. And so it's good to check in just to see, you know, it, is this just grief, like you said, or is this grief plus, you know what, I need a little extra support for my mental health in addition? The same thing can happen for trauma. So if you are someone, and I was definitely this person who experienced a lot of trauma in my life, that some of it had been dealt with. I'd seen a therapist for many years, a lot of talk therapy, but grief actually activated me on a level I did not realize. And I actually ended up with PTSD during my grief journey because that loss activated just a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't even realize was lying under the surface with regards to, you know, beliefs that were making me feel very afraid in the world and very unsafe in the world. And so if you are someone who has you know, past trauma history, whether one event or many, just be aware that if you are feeling, you know, like Ali said, a weight that is interfering with you taking care of your hygiene, taking care of your nutrition. There's, you know, Kelly, I'm sure there's other things too, your sleep as well, but definitely get that extra support, you know, get another layer of support because that's going to potentially be riding alongside grief. And I know I had to do those two journeys in tandem, which was incredibly challenging, but because I had a trauma therapist and I had all my grief support, I was able to navigate that. But there's definitely, you know, there's definitely, like Kelly said, a difference between this just hurts and there's validity in that pain. So we're not trying to say that that's easy. No, it's certainly not. But there's a difference between that and hopelessness that lasts for a very long time. And so I think there's a difference there. I know for me, how I felt was in those beginning weeks of grief, I felt very much like I had a weight on my chest, like I couldn't even breathe. And I felt a darkness in the world that was just felt unbearable. And as I moved through the grief journey, what ended up happening was I didn't miss Teddy less necessarily. Like I still miss him. Even people ask now, like, well, you know, are you done? And are you done grieving? And like, yes, maybe I'm finished with the the true sort of not true, but the beginning raw phase of that grief journey. But I don't know that I'll ever stop missing him and wishing like, oh, it'd be nice if he were here today, or seeing something and being like, oh, there's a bagel on the side of the road. Teddy would have totally gobbled that up. Like, that will never go away. I will never forget my dog, and I will never forget what we had. So it doesn't make sense that then I would forget that stuff. But I do think that what does change is there becomes a comfortability with the loss. It's like you just understand that there's the loss and then there's your life right now and you are living with both of those things. And it's a little bit different. There's like a piece there that wasn't there before. And that's kind of where I feel like you know that you've kind of moved into a different, you know, growth season of grief when you get to that point where you really do feel like there's a piece there that wasn't there. It doesn't mean you like it necessarily. It doesn't mean you're like happy with the circumstances, but there's just a piece there that doesn't interfere with, you know, everything you do every day.
So this would be a really great spot to talk about Kubler-Ross and the stages of grief, because people talk about this a lot. I do want to pause and say that you were so amazing to watch on your journey and how you came to realize the trauma that had happened in your life and taking charge and feeling agency in it.
Mhm.
And your willingness to be open about that and talk about it is undeniably amazing. And it was amazing for me to watch that transformation every week. It was really incredible. And so when your book comes out, people should really pay attention to that part of it, because the recognition of, oh my gosh, this isn't just Teddy. This was what Teddy did to get me to this point.
Yeah.
And this is how he helped me find my own power to take charge of my life again.
Yeah.
And so that was an incredible part of your journey. And it was such an honor of mine to be part of that recognition and to watch you find your power again.
Thank you. Yeah, I do think it's something that a lot of people, and we'll go back to the stages in a moment, but I do I do think that's one of the things that, while loss is incredibly painful, and while it is something, as you mentioned, we can't get away from, unfortunately. There is, there can be, I should say, there can be gifts inside of grief in the sense that if we are ready for change after that loss, or if we feel a sense of, you know, your chaplaincy keeps ringing in my ears, the questions: why am I here, what is my purpose, these big questions. And I would encourage you that if you have experienced pet loss, or if you are anticipating a loss, that you do reach out to someone like Kelly, who is a pet chaplain, because you can really begin to work with yourself on these big roadblocks sometimes that stand in our way of claiming the life that we want to live. And loss is actually one of the places where we're able to be given the opportunity to start again. And
Mm.
that's kind of what I did. And I feel like in doing that, I honored Teddy in the biggest way. Like I couldn't have honored him anymore. I feel like he lives on with everything I do, including sitting here with you and talking about this. So yeah, let's go back to what you were
Yeah,
going to say
let's
before.
go back to some basic psychology. All right, people, if you are an actual psychologist out there, I want to hear how close I'm getting. First of all, most people are going to experience the shock, the disbelief, the denial.
Yeah.
That's usually what happens first. Um, but the stages of grief are not circular. I see that on like mugs or logos, or I was scrolling through something looking for pictures, and I saw that it was like it had arrows to the next one. And when I've talked about it, there are messy arrows going every which direction. It is not circular. It's not, oh, you're in stage 3 of grief. No, we use these names for understanding. When we name things, they are perhaps not as scary. I mean, I think it's one reason we have names for diagnoses and illnesses. Um, I struggle with anxiety a lot. I also struggle with depression, and I'm very open and honest about that. Having those names allows me to gravitate towards other people when they say, "Oh, I have depression." It's like, "Whoa, yeah, my people." Um, well, I have pet loss, and I have pet loss. Woo, my people. We can talk about this and be safe,
Yeah.
or hopefully safe.
Yeah.
It also gives us an understanding of a way to talk about our healing, because
Mhm.
we belong to the same group. So when we're talking about stages of grief, we're constantly going back and forth like a cocktail party in these feelings, and we're stopping in with the different stations. We're going
Right.
over to the
Right.
sadness table, and now, I got to go to angry table. I got to check in with them. World's worst cocktail party, by the way, at the angry table. Um, People tend to think acceptance is last.
Mhm.
You get there, and you're going to bounce around again. It is not a landing point. This is not jumping up to grab the flag at Bowser's Castle. For all my Mario people out there, this is a place you land for a little while, and you're going to bounce back.
Yeah.
The nice thing about acceptance is that once you've reached it, you know it's attainable, and I
Yeah.
can get there again.
Yeah.
And if you're thinking like, well, I know my dog is gone, to be blunt, as people say to me, I know my dog is dead. I've already accepted that. It's not the here
Yeah.
acceptance. It's the here. It's finding meaning in your life post loss, and your writing of a book is a huge part of your acceptance.
Mhm.
I've also heard it described as no longer having a desire to change your past.
Yeah.
When you are at a place where, okay, this has passed, I'll say with my dog Beth, because it's been about 3 years for her, these things happened. She had cancer that none of us knew about, and it ruptured, and she had internal bleeding. There's no way the doctor could have known. There's no way I could have known. We got her the best care we could in the time we could. we made it as peaceful a passing in a horrific situation. I can't change any of that. And I don't know that I would want to change any of it anymore because the outcome still would have been the same.
Yeah.
But in that moment, I experienced a lot of love from my colleagues,
Mhm.
from my family. My husband and I have learned how to negotiate new things in our lives.
Mhm.
She brought so much good into that, but
Yeah.
I'm 3 years out
Yeah.
doing this work all the time, so I confront it every week. And this is part of my acceptance. So it's not here, it's here, and how am I living with this loss?
Yeah. And I think
That
that's a
doesn't
great,
mean
yeah.
I have bad days. Woo, I
Right,
have
right.
bad
No, no. Oh, no. Right, right. You can still have days where you go through a box of tissues because something activated you and you feel like I'm feeling that pain right now and it's really strong and I want to sit here and I want to allow myself the space to cry. Like that is absolutely, even if it's 10 years down the road, like that is absolutely okay. Just like anything else, if you were to just become sad about, you know, a house that you once had that you loved or a partner that you once had that you loved, it's the same, the same thing. We're all given the ability to be sad sometimes or angry or whatever emotion is going to come through. But I love how you talked about that, instead of calling it acceptance. And I know George Benino, The Other Side of Sadness, that you recommended me read, he doesn't even believe in the stages. He believes that it's just sort of this fluid process. And we use the names of the stages just to kind of say these are things that could happen, but not everybody will even experience all of those things. But I love how you're talking about this idea of you wouldn't change the past. And I know for me, so the end of May is going to be Teddy's 3-year anniversary. And I am at a point now where I feel like I wouldn't change the past. As much as I want him here, the truth is that we all know our pets cannot be with us forever. Just like we're not going to be here forever. Just death is a natural part of being also alive. So we have to just sort of bear that, as it were. Um, but I do feel like watching or witnessing now what has happened since his passing and all of these things, all of these ways that I have learned to love myself, learned to embrace my power, learned to have a voice. None of these things could have happened without the loss. So I can more easily stand up and say, I wouldn't change the past because I needed, in some ways, there to be some cataclysmic change for me to address some of these things that I needed to address. And, there was going to come a time where Teddy wasn't going to be with me anymore, and I was going to have to address these things at some point. So I feel like I definitely get that sense of now. But I know in the beginning, the first, like month or two, I got to a point where at the end of that summer, that first summer, I was like, yeah, I'm acceptance. Like this is back when I thought you went through all that. I'm like, yeah, I'm in, although you had told me that it wasn't going to be like that. I was like, yeah, I'm in acceptance. I'm in a good place. I'm really feeling, I had just felt really good. Like I was like, yeah, I'm back to feeling joy again. This is great. Like I'm in acceptance. And then I still felt myself like looking for him. And I knew, and there was something in me that like wanted him. And I went on this just very spiritual type of journey. This is right before I ended up going into trauma therapy, where I just looked to see like where could Teddy be? Like I hired a medium. I like started engaging in psychic and medium stuff to see if I could contact him. And I was looking at the stars and wondering where he was. Like I was just desperate. I was reading everything I could about life after death. Like I was looking to see where he was. And it was interesting because I was almost disappointed in myself for I thought you were like accepting. Now you're not. Like, what's the deal? And you're so right. It's like, well, I needed to be in that place because then I ended up getting to a different place after that where I ended up actually having more of a spiritual connection to Teddy. And it was a different layer of that I couldn't
We
have had.
talked about that actually this last week. We call it leveling up.
Ah, okay, okay.
And this is like a group, they let me call it leveling up. Let's be honest. They just let me call it that. Um, Before I go into that, even if your pet dies by traumatic circumstances, I mean, like we see hit by cars in the emergency room. It doesn't mean that you can't find acceptance. Like, you don't have to be okay that this happened,
Yeah.
that your pet had a tragic loss. There is no covering that up. But you have this feeling of, I, like you mentioned, I don't regret loving them.
Right.
I don't regret being loved by them. That may be where you start your acceptance. You
Yeah.
you get to be angry at the person who was driving that car, or the person who didn't know you don't give xylitol to a pet, or whatever it may be. You get to be angry.
Yeah.
I am not taking that away from you, but your acceptance may look a little bit different than what we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
We ultimately, we made a choice. We had time to make this choice and say goodbye.
Yeah.
And I know not everybody gets that. And
So
I
true.
don't want someone to feel excluded from this
Yes.
conversation.
Yes.
It's just going to look a little different.
Yes. So true.
So leveling up. I'm going to go back to the Nintendo system because I am a product of the 80s. And when you're playing, I used Mario Kart because I'm horrible at Mario
Yeah. I
Kart.
go for it. Use it. I
And,
love that one.
and I would start, and they would have like the bumpers up for me because I would always go off. And my brother would just keep going without me. And I just had so many lives. And I had to use all of them to make it to the end. I never won. But you started out with the bumpers. And then once you feel like you've got some mastery on that, you go from easy to intermediate. And it's going to be a challenge again. It's not supposed to be coasting through. You were coasting through.
Yeah.
When you level up in your grief, it doesn't mean that you're better, but I use this as an example of maybe we're taking some things away, some buffer zones. You're encountering other people, or you're letting them know about your grief, that you have lost a pet and you needed to take time off of work to care for them, or to say goodbye, or just care for yourself.
Yeah.
We were experiencing the same thing, the same race course in a new way.
Yeah.
And it's going to be tough, and we're going to be frustrated. We may throw the controller onto the couch. We may stomp away or shove it away for a year because we don't want to play it again. We're leveling up. And we're just experiencing the same thing with a new mindset, with new tools.
Yeah.
I think on my end, that is so exciting to watch in somebody. And that's where people hop in and out of the support group.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing okay. Oh, I have a bad day. I'm going to come in. I'm going to get my support. I'm going to come back for a month, and then I'm going to take time off. Our support group is always open to people coming back and hopping in. The holidays are a huge time for people to come back. It's their annual ritual to come in. I actually have, this is from the holiday one. Oop, my screen's taking it out.
Oh.
We lit a candle for each pet that we honored.
Oh.
And as we left, we just had the candle glow, and people sat there with the candles until everybody was gone. And then I closed it. That's part of their annual ritual, to be part of that. So having, that's part of the leveling up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that I'm now down to certain rituals. I don't need them all the time.
Yeah.
Some people, that may be therapy. Like, you start twice a week.
Yeah.
And then at some point you go down to once a week, and maybe you're going down to every other, or you check in quarterly with your psychiatrist,
Yeah.
just to keep things on the level. That's a wonderful thing. And that's leveling up. And I love watching people level up like that.
Yeah, and I definitely felt that difference between the first year and the second year, as you talked about, when you go through that firsts, all the firsts, there's just, that's its own unique challenge. So when you get to that second year and the firsts are actually the seconds now, there is a difference, and you do have more tools, and you do have more, okay, I've been here before, so I understand this a little bit better. And I know for me, the second year, like the first year I had pictures of Teddy all over the house, like in every room. There were multiple pictures, multiple photo frames. I mean, I had this one room that looked like a shrine. And in the second year, I just felt like, I don't know that I need this now. I don't know that I need this much like blaring street lights of saying Teddy's here, Teddy's here. Like I feel Teddy more in here, so I don't need as many physical reminders. The same thing with like just the small trinkets of having things out. Like are still things I love. I have like a giant canvas of him, a big picture of him at the top of the stairs, and like a blanket that has his face all over it. Like there's still plenty of things in my home that have Teddy, but I definitely felt like I needed the stuff less to feel like I was holding on to him, and that was part of that leveling up as well. What do you think are some of the most common misconceptions that people have about pet loss or grief, pet grief? Um, and then, any misconceptions people might have about grief groups as well.
One big misconception is everybody else knows what you need.
Hmm.
You don't need a new dog or cat or bird right away. Or maybe you do.
Right.
I don't know. I love nobody knows your life. I don't know your life.
Right.
Nobody knows your life. I do suggest people pause and think about, why am I getting a pet? Am I numbing my pain? Or do I feel them calling to me? Um, somebody had said to me, like, I have a home and I can honor my pet by bringing in a new rescue.
Mhm.
And for them, saving a rescue was part of their healing and honoring, but it was consciously about that.
Mhm.
And the reason I ask for a pause is that if we don't pause and we're trying to fill a hole with another furry, scaly, feathery being, how much do you need to fill it? Unfortunately, some people do start hoarding animals and they get to a point where they can't care for them or themselves.
Mhm.
And so I bring that up. I suggest that people pause, but I know that there are circumstances out there. People are very ill and they need the companionship for their own health. It's not safe for them to be alone all the time, or so many, I can't think of all of them, but pause and think about, if I'm going to be getting another pet, why now? Am I ready? And that could be 2 hours after, it could be a year after.
Mhm.
Why?
Yeah.
If you have an answer for why, I'm good.
Right.
I'm good with you. Another misconception, 2 weeks and you're done. It just takes 2 weeks to grieve.
Yeah.
Bereavement, the legal entitlement to grieve, is usually 3 days for a workplace. We know that's not enough. Your grief, your bereavement is, well, the bereavement is as long as legally allows. And I love that there are companies out there that are offering bereavement for pet loss. If you offer that at your company, please shout it out. You've got so many pet people who would love to work for you for
Yeah.
that reason alone.
Yep.
Uh, but the grief lasts as long as it lasts.
Yeah.
So after 2 weeks, yes, I suggest maybe checking in with it. And if you need to speak with a healthcare provider, that's a good time to check in with yourself. But yeah, the sadness will last as long as it lasts. Gosh, I mean, those are the biggest misconceptions. Uh, Things I want people to know. If you know somebody who has lost a pet, put it on the calendar, put it in your phone to contact them 2 weeks later. Most people will stop checking in about 10 to 14 days.
Mhm.
And that's when the loneliness really sets in. Maybe do it a month later.
Mhm.
Take them out to dinner or bring a meal over so that you can both just cry uncontrollably without the waitress asking if everything's okay with your meal. Nobody wants to find out what's going on with their pen of pasta while they're crying. Pasta, great meal for crying, by the way.
Yeah, that and pizza.
Oh, pizza, always. So I think you're probably better to say what goes on in a grief group. I can say that I structure it in such a way that there is no hierarchy of grief. Every species is well represented, and nobody's grief is worse than another just because of the chronology.
Yeah. That was important for me to learn from you, for sure.
Oh
Like,
yeah, there's a
learning it.
chronological loss, and then there's where I am today.
Yeah.
When did I first start interacting with my grief? And those can be two different things.
Yes, they can. Yep.
I know I've worked with people who lost a pet in their childhood, like 30, 40 years past, and are just encountering it now. So there's a chronology of loss, and then there's the emotional chronology.
Mm-hmm.
But my grief groups do not have a hierarchy. The loss of your bird is not less than the loss of a dog.
Yeah.
In fact, birds last so long. I mean, they can last like 80 years.
I know. That's a long time.
No, yours is not less than anybody's else's. Um, I've tried different formats in having people engage, but usually when people first come in and come to our group, I invite them to hang back
Mm-hmm.
and be the last one to introduce themselves, to talk about who they are, what brings them there, because I want them to get a sense of the pattern and the flow and how everybody else interacts with each other rather than being on the spot. But if all you get out is hi and you choke up, you start crying, that's your check-in. That's enough. We all know what those tears mean. We know what that lump in the throat means. You said hi. We're good. And
Yeah.
next time I know you'll say more. Sometimes sitting back and listening to the wisdom of other people is all you need in that moment.
Yeah.
So that is the basic structure of my support group. As you mentioned, we laugh, we cry, we ask questions. One time we did laughter therapy. I don't know if you were there for that one.
I was there for that. Yes, that was interesting. I love also we sometimes did like this special, you did a special topic with us. So one time you had a Reiki healer come and do like an energy workshop with us for anyone that wanted that. And that was really powerful for me. I loved learning about that. And actually, I ended up getting Reiki 2 certified not long after that. So there were lots of cool things that you did like that. And I know you did that one exercise, which I found really helpful, where you did the spoke of a wheel and you asked people to put um, I think you asked them to put sort of what their pet meant to them in the spokes. Like what did they get? You know, maybe they got companionship, maybe they got feeling special, maybe they got warmth, like physical, actual warmth. And you asked us to put that in a spoke, and then you asked us to write down outside the wheel where we were getting that now. And if there were
Mhm.
any places where in our spoke we were like it was loose because we didn't have that, not filled in the sense that the pet is ever replaced, but just that aspect of whatever you were getting. How are you supporting that now?
Yeah.
And that was really helpful to see. And actually, at the time, I had all my spokes filled in, and that really made me feel good because I was like, oh, I'm I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Like I feel good, and this is why I feel good because I am getting the support that I need, and I'm able to see where those holes were, and I'm able to not necessarily plug them up, but I'm able to just mend the stitches, to kind of infiltrate Teddy's love, but then also something else that makes me feel like day to day, I still have that connection with him, or I still have whatever it was that we had together, like, exercise. Our
Yeah.
dogs often give us a lot of exercise. So like making sure that I was still getting my walks in and getting to the fells with Coors, even though he wasn't a neighborhood walk dog. So I was missing my neighborhood walks. And sometimes I take myself, or sometimes I just go to the woods instead. So I love that you did that exercise. That was really fun. And one of the other things that I know that you did, I love that you had people when they come in for the first time, because I remember this with me, you don't make them speak, and you always tell them, if you can't speak at all, that is fine. You just pass, or you can shake your head if you can't talk, and we will not, you won't be called on. So there's no pressure there. And I didn't think I was going to even be able to say anything the first time I went. And I did, and I ended up like crying the way through, putting my hands over my face. Like, I was so embarrassed. But then, by the third time I went to grief group, I think, and I cried, I was like, oh, I'm not embarrassed anymore. Like, these are my people. Like, this is fine. And it actually gave me a lot of confidence to then be more vulnerable and potentially shed tears in front of other people. Because
Mm.
I was never really a crier, like in public or even with people I trusted. So it really loosened that gate that I had over my heart that said, like, I can't do this in front of people. So it was almost like practice for me to
Mm.
feel more, a better sense of confidence in those spaces where I wasn't necessarily at full capacity or happy or whatever. The other thing that I really loved, and I remember that this really helped me too, was when I was that first day when I was going to speak, listening, like you said, to all the people sharing. It puts words into feelings that you have that you may not have words for. And like you said, words can be very empowering for us, and they can also feel like a sense of grounding. So we know where we are in space. And I felt like, as people were talking, especially when one person spoke and they had a lab just like I did, it was like, oh, they're expressing this, and that is how I feel, or that's similar to how I feel, and now I actually feel like I have the words for how I feel because of that. So I really appreciated that I got that out of grief group. I think a lot of people do, is that you get a chance to, if you don't have the words for what you're feeling, sometimes that leaves a lot of confusion and a lot of frustration on top of your grief. And so when you can go to a place where you listen to words, this is often why we read stories, why we love books, why I even bothered to write one, is because when we hear someone else's word, we hear someone else's story, we resonate with that, and we say, oh my God, that's me. And I think that that's so powerful.
Well,
And
that's
it
what
really,
2-year-olds do. They
right,
don't have the vocabulary
right,
to express how they're interacting with the world. And so what do? They cry, they throw temper tantrums,
yeah,
they bite. We do that as adults, but not, it's metaphorical.
right,
Some adults do throw temper tantrums. I worked in customer service for many, many moons. Some people do throw temper tantrums. Metaphorically, they will bite back. And we need a vocabulary, and
yeah,
we don't have a vocabulary. We're inventing words as we go along.
yes, yes.
And the power of a group of people to invent words together
It's the
is,
language. Yeah, it's true. It's the language of pet law. It's like, and it really is. If you've never been there before, you may not have those words yet. Or even if you have been there, but you weren't supported, you may not have those words yet. So I really did appreciate that. The other thing that was really fascinating to me, and I remember I wrote down a little notebook, was that I wasn't expecting all the range of emotions. I was like, grief equals sad, grief equals crying. That's it. There isn't anything else. And you were like, everything's on the table, and basically let us know, you know what? As long as you are expressing yourself in a way that doesn't harm you or harm others, you have that right. And it was really interesting to me because I didn't expect to hear so many people angry in grief, like this anger, both maybe anger at themselves, maybe anger at the pet for leaving, for what felt like abandonment, or angry at the medical staff, or angry, whoever, angry at their spouse for not grieving the same way. There was a lot of anger that I didn't expect. And I had a lot of anger as well that I wasn't expecting. And I'm someone who never learned how to express anger health in a healthy way. So grief was really the opportunity for me to do that. And that was so much to your, sort of thanks to you, because it was just the perfect time for me to hear those words from people, and to hear you validate that anger, and to encourage you to express that anger in a healthy way. And I never really thought, and I'm breaking it down in my notebook, like, anger question mark, express in a healthy way. Like, this is a thing. I did not know this was a thing. Like, you could do this. I just thought anger, especially in a woman, it's bad. You just stuff it down. And then at some point you erupt, and like, that's also bad. And then you feel guilty for erupting. So, being able to express anger and grief, I think, is something that really it frees up energy in our body. I know for me, like one day I went and screamed in the woods. Like I just needed to scream in the woods. And it was all the primal, we all talk about that lump in the throat in grief, that feeling of that phantom peach pit. Like I know for me, I lived like that for months, just feeling that sense in my throat. And when Teddy passed, while it was a peaceful passing, and I'm so grateful I was, able to have that. I know not everyone does get to have that. Immediately after, I felt peace for a moment. And then, like, once that peace sort of settled, it was this raw sense of I want to scream. I want to break every window in like a 20-mile radius. But I didn't because, it's not what you do. Or at least that's not what I thought you did. And so that was storing in me. And I felt like a frozen tension in my body. And it wasn't until I released that scream in the woods that I felt energetically alive again. And that happened multiple times after. Like, I mean, I had a moment where I screamed like God and I punched pillows, but it was part of, I needed to do that as part of my grief journey because it helped to unlock that energy that otherwise would have been stored, keeping me kind of contained and tense. And so I think it's really interesting that we may feel, feelings of anger. We may feel jealousy. I know for a little while, like I felt jealous of people whose dogs were healthy and even though they were older, like of course I wanted them to have their pet for as long as possible, but there was that sense of like, well, my pet's not here, and I think that's just, as human beings, the range of emotions is one of the things that we experience, and it makes life richer to have both joy and sadness, to have anger and peace in our lives. So I really appreciated that from Grief Group, and I know you've seen people too that
Yeah,
have.
we're multifaceted beings. We
Yeah,
live
yeah,
we can't put on rose-colored glasses because there are so many other colors to be seen. And you can be red with anger. Red can be a beautiful color.
yeah,
Sometimes things are wrong and we need to push forward.
yeah,
Conflict by itself is not a bad thing.
yeah,
If we're harming other people with our conflict, that's different.
right,
And this is not original to me. This came from Bessel van der Kolk and The Body Keeps the Score. The the body does not speak the same language of the mind. We can meditate, we can soothe, we can kick in our parasympathetic nervous system, but your body really speaks another language, and it speaks the language of movement. I mean,
yeah,
you and I are both like, we're moving constantly as we're
yeah,
talking, like,
yeah,
oh, this is a big
yeah,
point.
yeah,
Uh, and so your body needs to move. If you need to go to Dave and Buster's and spend 15 minutes with whack-a-mole, do it. Do it. Have all the little kids be like,
yeah,
whoa. Um, Hit the whack-a-mole or go for a run, go for a walk, go into the woods. I've said go to the ocean because we're on the East Coast and the ocean's not far away. Go there and scream into the void.
yeah.
Do it. Nobody cares. And if they do, well, so
You weren't their friend anyway, so.
what? Just go to a different beach. Um, there are so many great places to go and just scream into the void. Do it. Say whatever it is you need to say to the higher power or the entity of the afterlife that you need to be angry at. They can take it.
Yeah.
If they can't, they're not a great entity. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I think
I'm just waiting for the lightning to strike me.
that having that sense of permission sometimes, I think that's what Grief Group can do too, is giving you the permission that you don't even know you need. Like you're either your younger self needs or your unconscious mind needs to hear like that permission to say, yes, go ahead and do that. Because sometimes we're too afraid to do something that we've never done before, especially in loss. But getting permission from someone else that says, this is what's helped me here, like you go do it if you want to, I think sometimes just gets people started on that,
Yeah,
on
it's
that
not a
journey.
group of people just sitting around being sad and crying together.
It's not. No, it's not. I think that was also a common misconception I had. Like it definitely isn't that. It's a sharing, but there's also a lot of really great wisdom and insight that comes from the group, where I feel like you get a sense of almost enlightenment by being there. So I know that there's that sense of upliftment really does happen, in grief groups.
How we memorialize. I mean, we talked about different memorial options and
Yeah.
the products that are out there, and people would say, oh, this was really great. I got this on Etsy and this seller's really awesome. Or, I went to this company website and I bought stuff and I would never go back there again. I mean, that's not something I can really provide to people, but they can do it amongst each other. Or just, oh my gosh, so many things that happened there. And the laughter, the
Yeah.
absolute, nobody associates laughter with support groups, and yet there is so much to laugh about. There really is. And even if you can only just smirk,
Yeah.
it's just a little, oh, the change in your body. When we laugh, we release oxytocin and that love hormone. We release things that soothe us. And that's why we did a laughter meditation. And there's literally like laughter meditation or laughter yoga. You can look it up on other YouTube channels. But I came in and I just started cackling.
I remember that.
It's infectious. I have a really infectious cackle. And watching everybody else start laughing, and we laugh for 2 minutes straight about nothing other than maybe my laughter. And we talked about how our bodies felt afterward.
Yeah.
It didn't last forever, but it was a break. And it was one of those, like, if I'm really feeling low, can I crack a stupid joke just enough for me to have a little chuckle, just to break the cycle of where I'm at? If I'm driving and I'm overwhelmed, I have been overwhelmed where I had to pull off the road from my grief. And if I could just like call my husband and crack a stupid joke and go, oh my gosh, that like sigh.
Yeah.
Okay, now I can get on the road. I can get home and I can really have whatever is going on inside of me, let it loose, rather than being on I-95 with a 3-ton vehicle.
Right. Yeah, because sometimes you don't have the ability to, sort of, I'll call it breakdown, but we're not necessarily breakdown, but where you need that space to be able to just kind of fall apart. But if you're taking care of a child in that moment, or you're driving, or you're, piloting a plane, or something, you don't always have that ability to stop. So it is good to have some tools to be able to utilize just to get you from point A to point B for right now, a temporary, solution to the issue. And I think laughter is one of those things that you can use. And
A
there's
lot of
also,
professions have dark humor. Like the guy on TikTok who does the IKEA videos where he was pretending, well, he did used to work in customer service with IKEA. I mean, that is all dark humor, and it's funny if you've worked in retail before. Maybe not if you're the person he's describing, but every profession has got some level of dark humor. It's okay to have dark humor as long as you don't live
right,
there.
right,
It's a place to visit, much like the
right.
different tables in the grief. Go ahead and visit, but don't pull up a chair.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a lot of that happens on your grief journey of the ands. Like, you can remember something and feel a spark of joy, and then feel sad about it. You can, be rip roaring mad about something that happened, and then you can also right after that be in tears. It's a very,
Or at the same time.
right, it's a very mixed emotions journey. And so it's okay to be in all these places, and be in all these places at once even.
Um, I think one of the hardest things is if you've been angry, going back and apologizing to people and just saying, you know what? That was my grief taking me. I'm sorry I took it out on you. And if you're a recipient of that, say thank you. Not, no, it's fine. Don't worry about it. this is somebody who's coming to you and apologizing and is taking the courage to do that. Say thank you, or, yeah, I was wondering what was going on and I wanted to give you space. Thank you for letting me know. The thank you is the important part. And the acknowledgement that their courage to come and say this to you and ask for forgiveness may be a catalyst for the strengthening of your own relationship. You're giving that person power. Just by saying thank you for saying that, you are giving that person power again.
Mhm.
Dismissing it and saying, "Don't worry about it. I don't care." It's really a dismissal of what that person's doing in this moment, which is having courage. And so if you have been someone who has acted out in anger, I hope that you have people you can go to and say, "I'm sorry I acted out in that. I'm grieving and I didn't expect it to come up like that." Try it with a few people you trust and see what happens. But if you're the recipient of that, please accept it. Don't dismiss it. It You will see something amazing happen in their eyes. Watch for it. There will be a spark of love.
Yeah.
Just
Oh, that's a great way to
believe.
describe it. Spark of love. It's been so amazing to chat with you and to just open up.
I know we could do like another hour.
I
Like,
know we could. We could be here all night long and then have to order pizza because at that point,
ah!
But is there anything, first of all, where can people reach you?
You can find me on my website, veterinarychaplaincy.com. You can also email me, petchaplainkelly@gmail.com.
And that's
If
Pet
you are
Chaplain
working,
Pet
yeah,
Chaplain Kelly, correct?
why? Yep, and I'll make sure that we have it written for your
In the
description.
comments. Yep, we'll put that in the comments for you all.
If you are working at a veterinary hospital and would like to partner up and get some materials that you can hand out to people at a time of loss, or people who are inquiring about that, I would love to partner with you to work on spreading this out or help you connect with colleagues that I have maybe in your area. If you're looking to find a pet chaplain, the Association for Veterinary Pastoral Education is a 501(c)(3) that is training people to do this. You can also go look for your local seminary and see if there are people who want to work in loss and grief. They may not be specifically trained for pet work, but they're on the same journey of chaplaincy. So many resources. If you're working in a veterinary hospital, love to find ways of making this resource more available to you where you don't have to be the professional in this. You can work with other professionals and network. That professionalism is all about the networking. So let's do this. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, collaborate for, a better world for those who are experiencing pet loss.
It's the
Thank you.
vanilla ice plan. Stop, collaborate, and listen.
Just a little bit of Kelly's humor for you all, so you know that you'll have a laugh or two if you do work with Kelly or go to any of her grief groups. Well, thank you so much, Kelly. I loved having you here. It was such a pleasure. And I hope to see you soon.
Thank you for inviting me. This has been wonderful.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you back here soon.